Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm Peter Lavelle. As everyone else points fingers and litigates this presidential election in the United States, the media has its agenda, obviously. I wanted to talk to John Laughland, our guest here on the Gaggle today, more about the broader picture, a broader strokes of what's going on here, because this is a turning point for what Americans understand what democracy is about, because we have totally divergent narratives here. And no matter what the outcome is, half the country is going to feel that the election was stolen from them. And so this is the dangerous point we have. We will have, when it is called, and it could be any hour now or any week, we'll have half the country saying, not my president. And a democratic republic cannot survive that. You could say in 2016, it was an aberration. It was a one-off. It was a fluke. He got in, by a means unimaginable. But now there was no blue wave. The Republicans picked up in the House of Representatives. It looks like they're going to hold the Senate. So you can say whatever you want about Donald Trump, but this last election says he's real, and the movement that he's woken is real, and the challenges ahead are real because the divisions are really, really deep. So from your perch there in France, John, what are your thoughts?
Well, they're pretty gloomy. I mean, I am already in a depressed state of mind at the incipient totalitarianism of the lockdown and the horrible sense that we are going much farther to stifle here in Western Europe and in the Western world than even I, who have been a doommonger for some time, anticipated. And against that background, that background of the new totalitarianism, when I say totalitarianism, the British, as of today, Friday, or as of yesterday, Thursday, the 5th of November, are not allowed to leave their country without a reasonable excuse. That's pretty Soviet to me. And we've seen terrible abuses. So I'm already in a pretty fragile state of mind. But when I got up this morning and saw newscasters on CNBC and on MSNBC interrupting Trump's statement and saying, we are interrupting the president to tell you that what he is saying is false and absolutely untrue, I really began to feel to break out in a cold sweat, because that seemed to me to be an example of the media. This show is talking about the media taking over it's a role as the judge of democracy and interrupting the president, who was making a serious or anyway severe allegation about voter fraud. How do they know, those newscasters, the allegations are untrue? If they're untrue, presumably there'll be an investigation, but they're not the people to say it. And I've said now for years and a decade to my Russian friends that all the attacks against Russia for being supposedly a conservative society or whatever, or patriotic or interested in history, and above all the attacks on Russia for spreading disinformation, I've been saying to my Russian friends for years, these attacks are not directed against you, the Russians. They are directed against us, Europeans and Americans, who are on that side of the argument. And last night, when those newscasters stepped in to say that the president of the United States was telling untruths, and that the media, knew better than he did what was going on in Arizona or Georgia or wherever, that point now has been reached. We have now reached the point that I have been warning my Russian friends about for a long time. In other words, this whole thing about disinformation, this whole fantasy and paranoia, artificially stoked paranoia about fake news, has now reached its logical conclusion, which is that the media now tell us what is true and what is not true. And in particular, they deny. How can they deny it? The American elections, I'm sorry to say this, Peter, I know you're an American, are famously corrupt. They are
Yes,
corrupt.
they are.
They are corrupt. The Americans are very proud of their constitution. By the way, British elections are getting more and more corrupt as well, including as a result of postal voting. There have been lots of voter fraud in Britain as a result of postal voting. Americans are very proud of their constitution, which is fine, but the practice of American politics leaves a lot to be desired. We saw that in 2000. We're seeing it again in 2020. And to me, to allege voter fraud is not at all implausible. It's not at all implausible. And therefore, it's an allegation that should be discussed and investigated, not one that should be dismissed out of hand by thought police.
Well, what we have here is the ultimate triumph of ideology over democracy, a triumph of ideology over the rule of law, because ideology trumps everything else. Okay, and another interesting thing that we saw in 2016 and now in 2020 is the demonization of the electorate. The electorate is demonized. I mean, that's very rare, okay, when you get down to that, okay? But what it does is that one of the interesting things when I tell my Russian friends, why do people like Donald Trump in America? And I said, well, he recognizes half the country that has been ignored for decades. Okay, I'm not saying he did a lot for them. Okay, that's a different debate. But he acknowledges their existence because not only does he claim that he will protect them, but he says, I know you're here and I know you're suffering and I know what you're interested in and what your needs are. See, this is this neoliberal ideology dismisses the elements of the electorate, if it's even half of it, is immaterial because they're not converted. And if you're unconverted and you're soiled and you're dirty, you're not worth redemption because we know the truth and we will move forward and we will move forward at your expense, okay? Because this new secular neoliberal church that they have created, they have everything they need. They have the sacred texts, they have the clergy, they have the liturgy, they have everything. And what they'll do is they'll to further their their power ambitions. They come up with these things. Donald Trump's a racist. Russiagate. They come up with these conspiracy theories, and then you have the mandarins of the information universe. I don't know. Zuckerberg, did he get a degree in psychology or did he get a degree in political science? I mean, how does he know the truth? And then over the people over at Twitter, they will determine the parameters. I mean, I've told people, if you go back to the foundations of the American Republic, if you and their equivalent to the internet was pamphlets, okay? And some of the things they said in those pamphlets were amazing. They slandered, they slurred, there were innuendos, and you know what? The foundations of the Republic became solidified. It can handle that, okay? What these people are saying is that you can't handle what reality is because we will construct it for you. And if you don't understand it, it's not our fault. It's your fault. And if you can't understand it, why should you participate? It is a very totalitarian project.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that as we observe what's happening in our own societies, we understand better how it happened in Russia and how it happened in Eastern Europe. Those were not freak events. They were driven, as today in America and in Western Europe, by an elite, which you've described very eloquently, which regarded itself as in the vanguard of progress and which was afraid and which demonized the electorate and those politicians who seem to stand in the way of that progress. It's nothing but the dogma of the deplorables that Hillary Clinton evoked in 2016, and which, of course, probably cost her the election. But what I find so incredible is the blatant now deployed. The permitted margins of debate have been narrowing for a long time through political correctness, but now they are narrowing in a much more physical and material way. So people before may have felt less and less comfortable speaking out on issues like immigration or the other sensitive issues that have been ring-fenced, but now they get their Twitter account closed down. or they get it flagged up as having fake news. So it's much more brutal. It's much more factual, this restriction that's now happening. And ultimately, I suppose what I find so incredible is that you almost think that the news presenters who shut down or interrupted President Trump last night to say that he was not telling the truth, you almost think that they are trying to be a caricature, a Trumpian caricature of the fake news media, because they are the ones policing what can be said and what cannot be said. And so, as you suggested in your question, Peter, yes, I'm full of foreboding, because the country does seem to be very divided. And if, as I fear, Trump doesn't win, his supporters will be convinced, I am certain, of the Trumpian narrative, which is that the election was stolen by the media and by democratic voter fraud.
You mentioned cancel culture, but see, it's much wider and deeper, because the way this election is playing out is that the half of the electorate is being canceled, okay? Because we've gotten used to this paradigm, this narrative of silencing people that deviate from the established and now enforced narrative. But so not just this one-off conservative or this website or this YouTube page. No, it's like, Red America, it's over. We don't, and we don't. Not only is we don't care what you have to say. We will even judge if you have the right to say it. I mean, the entire Enlightenment project is caving in on itself. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we all know that states used to practice censorship. Up until, and of course, in some respects they still do, but broadly speaking, less and less. And that the basis for abandoning censorship was that it was better for there to be an interplay of ideas and for people to be able to say more or less what they wanted and for the consumer to decide. But that has basically long fallen foul of the force of political correctness. And the internet, of course, was supposed to be and has been a large area of freedom, with the abuses that come with freedom. There's no doubt about it, but it was a large area of freedom, and that has made people frightened. That has made the forces of whatever you want to call it, liberal elite, frightened, because they can see that people, when they get together, even virtually, they can at least exchange information and therefore have some kind of effect. And that is what is now being taken away. And given that we are now all dematerialized with COVID, we can't meet each other anymore. We have to go through the screens. We have to go through our computers and the internet. Well, if they weigh that, then we really have got nothing left. And that's why I think the situation is so serious.
Yeah, the pandemic was the perfect storm for this ideology, this totalitarian mindset. It was perfect for it. Okay. Yeah. And what it does is it conditions people as well. One of the things that was highly, the polls, again, were wildly off. I mean, far worse than in 2016, far worse. But, there's this phenomenon called the shy Trump voter. Well, as things are moving forward, John, I don't think they're going to be so shy anymore, okay? And I think that is what we're going to have happen here is it'll be, in a sense, kind of a dual power, because if the media and the Democratic Party and this totalitarian ideology thinks that they can just get rid of Donald Trump, they better think twice. When you think about everything, big Trump supporter, okay, because his foreign policy disappointed me a lot. I want to make it very clear. I'm trying to defend the achievements of the Enlightenment, the achievements of some of the great conservative thinkers of our time that contributed so much to our political culture. But what's happening right now is that what we're seeing is this true separating of society. I always tended to think that and maybe I'm just projecting myself onto others, but I like to sit down and talk with people I disagree with. Okay, I mean, I think you can learn from people that you disagree with here. But now both sides, as a result of the election, are not going to talk to each other. That's a kind of end point. Okay, and I don't know what comes after that. But the sad thing for me is that, you know, this it is so rigid. It is so rigid and uncompromising, and I think that that's what kind of scares me. I mean, I looked at the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, and then I saw when Attorney General Barr was in front of Congress, and just the crass. I mean, that's something you and I never saw in our life, okay? I mean, when there was the Watergate hearings, there was civility, I mean, even levity from time to time. But this is just like a lurid blood sport. You have to annihilate. You don't have to win. You have to annihilate your opponent. That's an area where it's a very bad place to be, because, you know, as I always tell people, when you accuse someone of being like Hitler, it's hard to unring that bell. Okay, I mean, then if you call someone Hitler, how do you sit down and talk to him and negotiate your differences? You can't, because you called him Hitler. This is the extremism that is so unnecessary and destructive.
Well, I think you've identified the key characteristic of all this when you talk just now about Kavanaugh and Barr. I think there is a terrible, obviously, decline in political debate. You can't even call it debate. And I think that what we are witnessing, you know, it's putting the media back into mediocre. In other words, it's a victory of not the media, but a victory of the mediocre over the exceptional.
Yes.
I'm, like you, not an unconditional supporter of Trump by any means, but if he is defeated, it will be by mediocrity and by the horrible numbing, as you say, rigidity and stupidity of this ideology. But again, that's totally communist. That's what the Soviet system was. The Soviet system promoted zeros. You had dolts running the country because they were the ones who rose in that kind of system. And I'm afraid that is also why these developments remind me so much of the communist period. They are totalitarian, but they are above all stupid, and they are totalitarian because stupid. But I'm not as optimistic as you are, Peter, when you said even if they beat Trump, he's not going to go away because these issues have been opened and so on. I'm afraid I think Trump's victory, if he had one, or if he does win, is almost the last chance. And if he is beaten, yes, the political forces have been awakened. Yes, I agree with that. And what he did has been put on the agenda. But I'm afraid I'm a political realist. A defeat is a defeat.
Well, maybe I should recharacterize.
If he gets, a lot of other people will go down.
I recharacterize. I mean, if Biden is inaugurated in January, and who knows how long he'll stay in office, we have that cackling vice presidential candidate probably rubbing her hands, and the people that surround her. But if, for example, when Trump is out of office, if they take him off of Twitter and off of social media, they'll go out and start suing him. I mean, lawfare all over again. Sure, what they can do is they can go after him. But what my point is, going after them, the left does it at their own peril. Okay, because as I always explain to people, is that Joe Biden was selected. He was selected by the powers that be, the people that surround Obama, the DNC here. Donald Trump in 2016 was chosen by the people, okay? Yes. And one of the reasons, and we had voter turnout, the highest maybe in my lifetime, that tells you a lot. Trump got 2 million more votes than Hillary Clinton. And so, as I keep trying to tell people, this is a real phenomenon. This is not a one-off joke that you can say, we're going to go back to normal. No, this is the new normal, and it was the totalitarian ideology that has created this new normal, and there's no turning back, because this ideology cannot admit mistakes, because they've turned it into a secular religion. God can't be wrong.
Mm-hmm. No, but I'm afraid, all being already very powerful, they can continue to wield power, and Trump was one of the few people who resisted that power. And if he goes, then it is very bad for all of us. So I'm afraid I am filled with foreboding, because I think that the situation is was already very serious, and I think it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. Okay. Well, leave it on that note, John. John Laughland joining here to me on the gaggle here. If you like this, please like, share, and subscribe. And we're going to keep laser focused on what's going on with this election.